Hello everybody, this is Refresh and I'm here to bring you a battle between these two War of the Spark sealed decks. I have a Gruul deck over here and the Rakdos deck over there. We will be playing the best of 3 and we will roll to see who goes first. Gruul gets 9, Rakdos gets 5. Gruul chooses to be on the play. They will draw 7. They draw a Burning Prophet, a Forest, a Primordial Worm, a Centaur Nurturer, a Mountain, a Raging Crunch, and a Snare Spinner. I think because we have two drops, we can keep this, and we can hope to draw more lands to reach our Raging Crunch and then Centaur Nurturer. Rakdos draws 7. They draw a Mountain, Nahiri Storm of Stone, Swamp, Dreadhorde Twins, Mountain, and Swamp. I think this is a little light on action and there's only 4 drops here, so I think we're going to ship this back because we're on the draw and we can afford to look for a better hand here. We now have a Swamp, Massacre Girl, Ob Nixilis' Cruelty, Mountain, Swamp, Nahiri, Storm of Stone, and Bleeding Edge. I think this is a much more keepable hand because, I mean, it is all removal and Massacre Girl, but I think that's fine enough for us. Where we'll go ahead and take Nahiri and stick her on the bottom. Turn 1, Gruul will play a Forest, and then Gruul will pass the turn. Rakdos will draw, gets a Mountain, will play a Swamp, and then Rakdos will pass the turn. Gruul draws, gets a Forest, Gruul will play the Mountain, and then we'll tap the Mountain and the Forest to play a Burning Prophet. It is a 1/3 human wizard, and it says whenever you cast a non-creature spell, Burning Prophet gets +1/+0 until end of turn, then scry 1. And then Gruul will pass the turn. Rakdos draws, gets a Bond of Revival. Rakdos will play the Mountain, and then Rakdos will pass the turn. Gruul untaps, Gruul draws, gets another Forest, we'll play the Forest, and then we'll tap all 3 of these to play the Raging Crunch. It is a 4/3 beast, and it says Raging Crunch can't attack alone. Then we will attack with the Burning Prophet for 1. Rakdos will not block and will take 1 to go to 19. And then Gruul will pass the turn. Rakdos draws, gets a Mountain. Rakdos will play a Swamp, and Rakdos will pass the turn. Gruul untaps, Gruul draws, gets an Invading Manticore. Gruul will play a Forest. Gruul will attack with the Burning Prophet and the Raging Crunch for 5. Rakdos will tap 3 and then play Ob Nixilis' Cruelty, which says target creature gets -5/-5 until end of turn. If that creature would die this turn, exile it instead. Targeting the Raging Crunch, Rakdos will take 1 from the Burning Prophet to go down to 18. The Raging Crunch is exiled, and then on the second main phase, Gruul will tap all the mana and then play a Centaur Nurturer. It is a 2/4 Centaur Druid. It says when Centaur Nurturer enters the battlefield, you gain 3 life, so we'll go up to 23. And then it says tap, add 1 mana of any color. And then Gruul will pass the turn. Rakdos untaps, Rakdos draws, gets a Swamp. Rakdos is flooding pretty badly. We'll play a Mountain, and then Rakdos will pass the turn. Gruul untaps, Gruul draws, gets a Forest. Gruul will play the Forest. Gruul will attack with the Burning Prophet for 1. Rakdos will take 1 and then go to 17. On the second main phase, Gruul will tap all the mana and also the Centaur Nurturer for another green, and then we'll play a Primordial Worm. It is a 7/6 worm with no additional game text. And then Gruul will pass the turn. Rakdos draws, gets a Charity Extractor. Rakdos will play another Swamp. Rakdos will tap 4 mana and play the Charity Extractor. It is a 1/5 human knight with lifelink. And then Rakdos will pass the turn. Gruul untaps, Gruul draws, gets a Band Together. Gruul will attack with the Primordial Worm and the Burning Prophet for 8. Rakdos will block the Charity Extractor and will take 7 from the Primordial Worm, but we'll gain 1 back from the Charity Extractor, and so we'll only take 6 total to go down to 11. On the second main phase, Gruul will tap everything, and then play an Invading Manticore. It is a 4/5 zombie Manticore, and it says when Invading Manticore enters the battlefield, amass 2. That is, put 2+1/+1 counters on an army you control. If you don't control one, create a 0/0 black zombie army creature token first. Here's our zombie army token. We'll put 2+1/+1 counters on it, making it a 2/2. And then Gruul will pass the turn. Rakdos untaps. Rakdos draws. Gets a swamp. Rakdos is flooding. We'll play the mountain. Rakdos will spend 3 mana and play Bleeding Edge. Up to 1 target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn, amass 2. We'll be targeting their zombie army. The zombie army dies. Rakdos gets a zombie army with 2+1/+1 counters, and then Rakdos will pass the turn. Gruul untaps. Gruul draws. Gets a Spellgorger Weird. Gruul will play the Spellgorger Weird. It is a 2/2 Weird. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Spellgorger Weird. Then we're going to tap 3 more mana and play Band Together. This is an instant. Up to 2 target creatures you control each deal damage equal to their power to another target creature. We will choose the Invading Manticore and the Primordial Worm to deal damage to the Charity Extractor. The Charity Extractor dies. Because we cast non-creature spells, the Burning Prophet gets +1/+0 until end of turn, and then we scry 1. So we will take a look at our top card. It is Jaya, Venerated Fire Mage. It seems like a good pick with all the red cards that we have, so we'll leave it on top. The Spellgorger Weird will get a +1/+1 counter, and then Gruul will attack with the Invading Manticore, the Burning Prophet, and the Primordial Worm for 13 damage. Rakdos will block the Primordial Worm and will take 6 to go to 5. The zombie army will die, and Gruul will pass the turn. Rakdos untaps. Rakdos draws, hoping for a miracle. Herald of the Dread Horde is not a miracle. Rakdos will play a swamp. Rakdos will tap 4 and will play the Herald of the Dread Horde. It is a 3/2 zombie warrior. It says when the Herald of the Dread Horde dies, amass 2. And then Rakdos will pass the turn. Gruul will untap. Gruul will draw. They get Jaya, Venerated Fire Mage. Gruul will tap all the lands and play Jaya, Venerated Fire Mage. She is a 5 loyalty Jaya Planeswalker and has the static ability. If another red source you control would deal damage to a permanent or a player, it deals that much damage +1 to that permanent or player instead, making all the red permanents deal 1 more damage. -2 Jaya, Venerated Fire Mage deals 2 damage to any target. Jaya enters the battlefield with 5 loyalty counters, and because we cast a non-creature spell, the Spellgorger Weird will get a +1/+1 counter, and the Burning Prophet will get +1/+0, and then scry 1. We'll take a look at the top card. Immobilized District, sure, we'll keep that right there. And then we will attack with everybody. Rakdos will chomp the Primordial Worm and will take 15 damage and perish. That's the end of game 1. We'll be right back with game 2. Seeing all the X3 creatures in Gruul's deck, Rakdos is intent on removing cards that are not good at dealing with the X3s, and so we will go through and remove a couple cards. We'll remove the Bleeding Edge because it's -2/-2, and the X3s will survive that. We'll replace it with a Lazotep Behemoth so that we can have a large creature to deal with their large creatures. Alright, for game 2, Rakdos will choose to go first. We'll draw 7. Rakdos draws a Swamp, a Mountain, a Grim Initiate, a Widespread Brutality, Nahiri Storm of Stone, and 2 more Swamps. This is not ideal, but we do have a turn 1 play, and we have the mana to cast all the rest of the cards, so I think we'll keep this regardless. Gruul draws 7. Gruul gets a Forest, a Forest, a Forest, a Centaur Nurturer, a Mountain, a Snare Spinner, and a Chandra's Pyrohelix. This is enough to get to the Centaur Nurturer, and we have some early plays. It's not a great hand, but we will keep it. Rakdos starts with a mountain. We'll tap the mountain and play the Grim Initiate. It is a 1/1 zombie warrior with first strike, and when Grim Initiate dies, amass 1. Then Rakdos will pass a turn. Gruul draws, gets a mountain. Gruul will play a forest, and then Gruul will pass the turn. Rakdos untaps, Rakdos draws, gets a Jaya's Greeting, will play the swamp, and then Rakdos will attack with the Grim Initiate for 1. Gruul can't block, will take 1 and go to 19. Then Rakdos will pass the turn. Gruul draws, gets a Burning Prophet. Gruul will play a mountain, and then Gruul will tap both of these to play the Burning Prophet. You've seen this before. And then Gruul will pass the turn. Before the end of Gruul's turn, Rakdos will tap the mountain and the swamp, and then cast Jaya's Greeting. It is an instant. Jaya's Greeting deals 3 damage to target creature, scry 1, targeting the Burning Prophet. The Burning Prophet dies. Rakdos will scry, looking at an Ingrath's Rampage, and leaving it right where it is. Gruul's turn ends. Rakdos untaps. Rakdos draws, gets an Ingrath's Rampage. What a surprise. Rakdos will play a swamp, and then Rakdos will attack with the Grim Initiate for 1. Gruul cannot block, will take 1 and go to 18. And then Rakdos will pass the turn. Gruul untaps. Gruul draws, gets a forest. Gruul will play the forest. Gruul will tap a forest and a mountain, and then will play the Snare Spinner. It is a 1/3 spider with reach. Whenever Snare Spinner blocks a creature with flying, Snare Spinner gets +2/+0 until end of turn. And then Gruul will pass the turn. Rakdos untaps. Rakdos draws, gets a Lazotep Behemoth. Rakdos will play a swamp. Rakdos just now realizes that these are both double red cards and we don't have the second mountain. So Rakdos will pass the turn. Gruul untaps. Gruul draws, gets a Chain Whip Cyclops. Gruul will play a mountain, and then Gruul will attack with the Snare Spinner for 1. Rakdos will decline to block, will take 1 to go to 19. Gruul will then tap 4 mana and play the Centaur Nurturer. Gruul will gain 3 life to go back up to 21, and then Gruul will pass the turn. Rakdos draws, gets a Cyclops Electromancer. Rakdos is still stuck, so Rakdos will tap a mountain and a swamp, and then play Ingrath's Rampage. It says sorcery, choose 1. Target player sacrifices an artifact, target player sacrifices a creature, or target player sacrifices a planeswalker. We'll ask Gruul to sacrifice a creature. Gruul sacrifices the Snare Spinner, and Rakdos will pass the turn. Gruul untaps. Gruul draws, gets a mountain. Gruul will play a forest as Gruul floods out. Gruul will attack with the Centaur Nurturer for 2. Rakdos will take 2 and go to 17. Gruul will spend 5 mana and play the Chain Whip Cyclops. It is a 4/4 Cyclops warrior, and it has an activated ability which says 3 red, target creature can't block this turn. And then Gruul will pass the turn. Rakdos untaps. Rakdos draws, gets at Ob Nixilis' Cruelty. Rakdos will pass the turn. Gruul untaps. Gruul draws, gets a Primordial Worm. Gruul will play the mountain. Gruul will attack with the Chain Whip Cyclops and the Centaur Nurturer. Rakdos will respond by tapping 3 and playing Ob Nixilis' Cruelty, giving -5/-5 to the Chain Whip Cyclops. And then we'll take 2 from the Centaur Nurturer to go down to 15. The Chain Whip Cyclops is exiled. On second main phase, Gruul will tap all the mana to play the Primordial Worm. And then Gruul will pass the turn. Rakdos draws, gets a Bond of Revival. Rakdos still doesn't have many options because they don't have the lands to cast any of their spells. So Rakdos will pass the turn. Gruul untaps. Gruul draws, gets a Courage in Crisis. Gruul will play the Forest. Gruul will spend 3 mana to cast Courage in Crisis. It's a sorcery. It says put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, then proliferate. We'll put the counter on the Centaur Nurturer. That's 1, and then we proliferate. We'll target the Centaur Nurturer to get 1 more counter. And then Gruul will attack with the 4/6 Centaur Nurturer and the 7/6 Primordial Worm. Rakdos will chump the Primordial Worm. The Grim Initiate will die and will take 4 damage from the Centaur Nurturer, going down to 11. On the Grim Initiate's death trigger, we'll amass 1. We'll get a 1/1 zombie creature token. Then Gruul will pass the turn. Rakdos draws, gets another Nahiri that we can't cast. Rakdos is quite sad and will pass the turn. At the end of Rakdos' turn, Gruul will tap both mountains and play Chandra's Pyrohelix. It's an instant. It says Chandra's Pyrohelix deals 2 damage, divided as you choose among 1 or 2 targets. You'll target 1 damage at the zombie army and 1 damage at Rakdos' face. Rakdos loses the zombie army, and then Rakdos' face will lose 1 to go to 10. And then Rakdos' turn will end. Gruul untaps. Gruul draws, gets a Raging Crunch. Gruul will attack with the Primordial Worm and the Centaur Nurturer for a combined 11 damage. Rakdos can do nothing but take 11 and perish. And Gruul takes the day in straight sets, winning 2-0. Rakdos' second game, they suffered very badly with mana issues, while Gruul just played a couple threats and was able to get through with them despite drawing a lot of lands. That is the variance of the game sometimes. I think the first game was a little bit more even. It's just that Rakdos didn't have the tools to deal with Gruul's large beasts. Let me know what your thoughts were about the games in the comments below. If I made any rules and or play errors, let me know so that I can get better at this game and learn from your wisdom. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. If you'd like to see more such videos, hit subscribe. Next time I'll be pitting these 2 decks up against the Face the Hydra Challenge deck from Theros. Until then, this was Refresh, and thanks for watching.